next question we are going to discuss is legalism in practice. The implementation of the entire system depends on the appearance of the truly enlightened ruler. The need for such a ruler constitutes the core of the whole imposing structure. A truly legalist enlightened ruler may be as rare a reality as Mencius's truly virtuous ruler. He is not to be an arbitrary despot, a tyrant who follows all his impulses, whims, and passions. Once the systems which maintain the entire structure are in place, he must not interfere with their operation. He may use the entire system as a means to the achievement of his national and international ambitions. But to do so, he must not disrupt its impersonal workings. He must at all times be able to maintain an iron wall between his private life and his public role. Concubines, friends, flatterers, and charismatic saints must have no influence whatsoever on the course of policy. He must never relax his suspicions of the motives of those who surround him. To some extent, Han Feizi's own execution may have been due to the first emperor's commitment to his admirer's maxim. Han Feizi regarded himself as the fully objective and disinterested exception to all his own generalizations about other officials and advisors. It is said that Han Feizi's advice to the first emperor concerning the treatment of his own native state of Han led the emperor to suspect that his views reflected partiality for his native land rather than an unreserved loyalty to the interests of emperor himself. Nevertheless, the first emperor of the Qin seems to have approximated the image of the legalist enlightened ruler. His adoption of Shenbu Hai's pure model of bureaucratic government was to have permanent consequences for the entire future course of Chinese history. He seems to have remained basically faithful to the principle that a true legalist ruler did not interfere arbitrarily in the operation of the objective and impersonal laws, mechanisms, and procedures which were imposed on the society as a whole. He extended the conception of objective standards and models to areas such as the standardization of the written language, the length of will axles, and the weights and measures. The obvious brutalities of the regime are very much related to legalist ideas concerning the inflexibility of the penal law and the need to purge society of dysfunctional attitudes and modes of behavior. If legalism seemed to have been vindicated as the rational means for pursuing state wealth and power, the goals of legalist program had the disturbing potential of becoming limitless in nature. The limitless cannot be rationally pursued. the limitless strain of human and material resources would have undermined the foundation of the system itself. The emperor's predilection for the popular correlative cosmology seems to have been related to an ambition to reach beyond the control of civilized world to achieve a kind of magical control of the ruling forces of the cosmos in the interests of his own personal immortality. The success of the Qin conquest seemed to have finally proven that the universal kingship could not be re-established without recourse to military power, and not simply by spiritual moral influence. In some sense, Confucius and Mencius were aware of this fact, which was made quite clear in the ancient texts. They just tried to minimize and muffle it. Kings Wen and Wu had enjoyed the mandate of heaven. They were able to attract to themselves the voluntary support of numerous allies through the power of their virtue. It was this enormous accretion of spiritual and moral power which was decisive in giving them victory on the field of battle. However, in the end, they could not deny that victory in battle had played its role. The Qin victory seems to be the defeat of mentioned prophetic hopes. The later Confucianist criticism of the Qin Revolution dwells on its rapid disintegration under the incompetent second emperor. This fact seems to have vindicated Xunzi's suspicion that such a system could only work for a time. It lent weight to Han Fei's observation that truly enlightened rulers were not likely to occur more than once in 1,000 generations. The system had hardly had time to become implanted as a second nature in the behavioral pattern of the people. Nevertheless, the realization of the system might require a succession of charismatic, enlightened rulers for its true implementations. The crucial role of fallible human agency could not be denied in the end. Confucian belief in the transformation of society through the virtue of ethical elites posits a certain potential for moral and intellectual initiative in human beings. In effect, it may be essentially more realistic than the simple behaviorist model enunciated by the legalists. It is able to take into account the role of human sentiment, ingenuity, cunning, and resourcefulness in frustrating and evading all institutional devices. The methods for selecting candidates for office do not really work that well. The personal power relations penetrate the very strongholds of bureaucratic organization. Private sentiments and passions cannot be ruled out. When the mass of men see no relationship between penal law and their own life interests, they will in the end prove extraordinarily ingenious in evading it. In order to illustrate this, let us look at the figure of Liu Bang. he is the founder of the Han Dynasty. As a man of a commoner origins, he takes advantage of the new opportunities provided by the Qin Revolution to secure a post in the sub-bureaucracy by passing a civil service examination. When in office, he hardly becomes the faceless bureaucrat who simply implements the law. Instead, he uses his position to win as much influence as possible among his superiors on the local scene. When assigned to head a labor group to work on the first emperor's mausoleum, he finds that many members of the group manage to escape. Like the other famous rebel, Chen She, he decides that he has no alternative but to raise the flag of rebellion. It is in this way that Liu Bang gradually made his way to power in a period of dynastic disintegration. Liu Bang wins out in the carnage of the ensuing civil war, not so much by virtue of his military genius, but by virtue of his superb judgment of men and his due regard for factors of sentiment and popular feeling. With brilliant military and political strategists around him, Liu Bang attains power as the first Han emperor. He was not committed to any clear formula of social-political organization. His power instincts inclines him to favor the centralized bureaucratic model of the Qin. As a pragmatist, he understands the need to compromise with all of his generals, who are quite unprepared to submit to this model. On the other hand, the first emperor of the Qin is the hereditary ruler of a state which had already implemented many features of a legalist program. By relying on the power of his own state and the disarray of the other surviving great powers, he is able to extend his rule to the entire civilized world. He can allow himself to indulge in the dream of a legalist utopia completely controlled by impersonal mechanisms of law, technique, and the mystery of authority. This is a society in which the incalculable forces of private passions, sentiments, values, and convictions are to be eliminated. The emperor placed no limits on his own fantasies of omnipotence. In contrast, Liu Bang rises to power by cunning and shrewdness. He knows that, in the end, even the achievement and maintenance of power require an ability to cope with complex and incalculable forces of personality, passions, moral ideas, and the unpredictable resourcefulness of others. Okay, this completes our discussion of legalism. Assignment today, could you say something more about implication of legalism? Thank you.